California's San Andreas fault is the most famous seismic threat in the United States. But as we move east into the heart of the country, we find a different fracture. The government classifies as a significantly greater economic risk. 15 million people live directly on top of this hidden fault line. Most are unaware that the ground beneath their homes is part of one of the most active seismic zones in North America. This is the New Madrid Seismic Zone. Because of the density of modern infrastructure in this region, the federal government projects that a major rupture here would result in the highest economic losses from a natural disaster in U.S. history. This scale of destruction is a matter of historical record. The fault has already transformed the American landscape once before. In December 1811, a series of earthquakes began that completely defied the scientific understanding of the era. The shocks were so violent that they were felt across 5 million square kilometers, more than half of the continental United States. Tectonic uplift actually pushed the riverbed upward in several places, creating instant mid-river dams. The Mississippi River was forced to stand still before the current began to surge upstream, flowing backward for several hours. The geography of the region changed in a single night. In northwestern Tennessee, the land sank so abruptly that the surrounding river water rushed in to fill the void, creating the 73-square-kilometer Reelfoot Lake over the ruins of a drowned forest. To put that power in perspective, the area of strong shaking in 1811 was 10 times greater than the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. It even surpassed the impact zone of the 1964 Alaska quake, the most powerful seismic event in North American history. The only reason the 1811 death toll remained low was the sparse frontier population. Today, that geographic luxury has vanished, replaced by millions of people living in the direct path of the fault. This seismic activity is driven by a 500-million-year-old scar in the Earth's crust. Known as a failed rift, it marks a period when the North American continent began to pull itself apart, before the process eventually stalled and left a deep buried weakness. As the North American plate moves, it faces constant compression. This ancient rift concentrates that stress into one narrow zone until the rock reaches its limit and snaps. This isn't an isolated event. Soil samples and geological markers show that this system has ruptured at regular intervals of 300 to 600 years for the last 4 millennia. Even between these major ruptures, the zone is never truly quiet. It currently produces about 200 measurable microearthquakes every single year. These constant tremors provide the data that seismologists use to monitor the zone. They are the evidence of a geologic machine that is actively loading stress toward the next major failure. To understand the risk, we have to look at the differences in geology between the Midwest and California. In the West, earthquakes occur in hard, cold granite. This dense rock acts as a stabilizer. It absorbs the energy of a seismic wave, meaning the shaking is intense near the fault, but quickly fades as it moves outward. The Mississippi River Valley is the opposite. It sits on top of millions of years of soft sediment, loose, water-saturated soil that has settled over the fault zone. This sediment acts like a megaphone for seismic waves. It amplifies the energy, causing the ground to shake harder and for much longer than it would in California. Because of this amplification, a single magnitude 7.7 earthquake in the Midwest would cause structural damage across portions of 30 different states. Nowhere is this more dangerous than in Memphis, Tennessee. The city is a major metropolitan hub built directly on top of the fault's unstable soil. Memphis has thousands of unreinforced masonry buildings. Without steel support, these brick walls are designed to withstand vertical weight, but they collapse outward during lateral shaking, potentially crushing the very fire and police stations needed for an emergency response. During a quake, the water-saturated soil beneath these buildings can undergo liquefaction. The ground effectively turns to liquid, causing foundations to sink and neighborhoods to subside. The city's infrastructure creates a trap. If the major interstate bridges crossing the Mississippi River are damaged, Memphis will be cut off from the West Bank, preventing aid from reaching the city by road. FEMA's catastrophic planning projects estimate that a major New Madrid event would cause nearly $900 billion in damage and mass casualties within the first 24 hours. A disaster on this scale would instantly overwhelm the nation's emergency resources. The federal response required would be significantly larger than any in American history. Because the Midwest is the gateway for national natural gas pipelines and river commerce, a regional earthquake here would immediately trigger a national supply chain and energy crisis. There is a scientific debate about how quickly stress is building, but the U.S. Geological Survey maintains a high alert status for the region, projecting a major event within the next 50 years. Despite these warnings, funding for earthquake preparedness in the Midwest is a fraction of what is spent in California. Psychologists call this the availability heuristic, the tendency to ignore risks that haven't happened recently. Californians have a lived memory of earthquakes, so the threat feels real. In the Midwest, the lack of recent major shaking makes the danger seem abstract and invisible, leading to a lack of investment in seismic retrofitting. The fault's long periods of silence exploit this human psychology. They trick millions into a sense of complacency, while the physical tension in the crust continues to build. The financial risk is just as severe. In the highest impact zones, fewer than 3% of homeowners carry earthquake insurance, leaving the vast majority of the population with no way to rebuild. We have to accept that government response plans cannot help during the actual shaking. Safety in those first 60 seconds depends entirely on individual preparation. For those living in the impact zone, preparation means identifying vulnerable masonry, securing a week of off-grid supplies, and adding earthquake riders to policies. Geological forces operating on a 500 million year timeline do not care about our readiness. The sleeping giant beneath the heartland continues to load stress with every passing year, and eventually the ground will move again.